We're on, Mike.
Okay, good morning, councillors, officers, members of the public and press. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. This meeting is a remote meeting being live streamed on the website and is also being recorded. I'll hand over to Joe to do the roll call and to declare any apologies for absence.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Planning Committee. We'll make a start with the roll call and apologies also. So the first name I've got on the list is I've got Councillor Stephen Akers-Belcher. I understand Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher is subbing for him. Christopher, can you just confirm that you can see and hear everyone and that you've got all the papers?
Yes, to them all.
Lovely, thank you. Is Councillor James Brewer with us? Nope. Okay, Councillor Paddy Brown, can you confirm that you can see and hear everyone and that you've got the papers, please?
Absolutely confirmed.
Thank you. Councillor Bob Buchan, are you with us?
Yes, I am at last. Yes, I've got the papers.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bob. I've got apologies from Councillor Tim Fleming with Councillor Shane Moore subbing. Shane, are you with us? You're on mute, Shane.
Yeah, I am, and I have all the relevant paperwork.
Thank you. Councillor James, are you with us?
Yes, I am, and I believe that I have all the paperwork.
Thank you. Councillor Lindridge.
Can see, can hear, and have the paperwork. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Loynes. Councillor Loynes, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yes, I'm here and I've got all the relevant paperwork.
Thank you. Councillor Carl Richardson.
Yes, I'm here and got all the relevant paperwork.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stokel.
Hi there. Yeah, I've got all the paperwork.
Thank you. And also Councillor Young.
Yes to all of the above.
We also have Councillor Tony Richardson with us. Are there any other members whose names I haven't called out that are taking part? Lovely. Just to let members know, if we have any votes today, we'll be doing them by recorded vote. When we call your name, if you could turn your microphone off mute and give your vote to us, please. And I've just gone through the apologies. As I said, apologies from Councillor Stephen Akers-Belcher and Councillor Tim Fleming. Both have substitutes. And I think that's everything from me, so I'll move back to the chair.
Thank you, Joe. Item 2, to receive any declarations of interest from members. Councillor Stokel.
Hi.
Yeah, you're on.
Yeah, is that working?
Yeah.
Yeah, on 4.1, item 3, 21 Hillcrest, I've spoken to the applicant about the application, but I don't believe I'm predetermined.
Perfect, thank you. Any other declarations of interest? Okay, item 3 minutes the last meeting. So 3.
Mike, it's me.
Councillor Loynes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As ward councillor, I've been involved with this a little bit as well, but I don't think it clouds my judgment at all. And I believe I brought it to committee, the application for the same as Cameron, Councillor Stokel.
Okay, in the interest of consistency, I've also had a conversation with the applicant, but I remain open-minded about the application. Item 4, items requiring consideration. Item 1, Unit 4, the Saxon Easington Road.
Chair, apologies, Chair. We
Oh,
need to
I did.
yeah,
Sorry. Councillor Loynes was putting a hand up. That's what caused the concern there. Item 3, 3.1, confirm the minutes of the meeting on the 5th of August. I wasn't here, so I can't do anything with that. Is there a proposer?
I'll propose them.
Councillor James.
Hello, I'll second them.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, item 4.
Chair, apologies again, Chair. I just need to raise a factual correction to the minutes of the 22nd of July. On those minutes, we said that Councillor Loynes had proposed a refusal for the Land at Hillview discussion. It wasn't, in fact, Councillor Loynes, it was Councillor Fleming that proposed that. We'll amend those minutes.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, determined to get to the applications, as you can tell. Okay, item 4.1. Item 1, Unit 4, the Saxon Easington Road. I believe Dan's taking this application.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. This item starts on page 2 of the PowerPoint and that of your handout, members. The site relates to Unit 4, the Saxon, on Easington Road. Planning permission is sought for a change of use from a shop in an A1 use to a drinking establishment with extended food provision, which would be an A3 and A4 use combined, which is now classed as an AA use under the use class order. No external alterations are proposed save for the installation of an external flue. The proposal is set out in full within the committee report. On the screen before members, as identified, this is the unit in question on the former Saxon public house, which has been converted into a number of units with single-storey units added to the end. The site in question relates to the, I'm just going to identify it here, is this building here, as we see on screen. It's currently a vacant building formerly occupied by a florist, as detailed within those photos there. That's a view across the front of the building, which does have a occupancy level, save for the florist. Again, further views looking from the to the front of the building. Here we have views to the rear, which is a car park and servicing area, and again a view to the rear boundary fence. The application relates to a single-storey add-on unit to the former Saxon public house. The layout of the site in relation to neighbouring properties is shown on the plan on page 3 of the PowerPoint. As we've just been through, there are photographs within the PowerPoint as detailed previously. The application is being brought before Planning Committee as more than 2 objections are being received in line with the Council's scheme of delegation. The relevant planning history is set out within the committee report. This includes reference to the previously refused applications for a change of use of the unit to a hot food takeaway. Such applications were also dismissed at appeal. The application has been advertised in the usual way as set out in the committee report. To date, there have been 6 objections and 1 letter of support. The objections are summarised within paragraph 1.11 of the committee report. No objections have been received from technical consultees as detailed within the committee report, subject to identified planning conditions. Turning to the main planning considerations which are identified in the report, the host unit is a vacant retail unit, last in use as a florist. As such, the general principle of the proposed uses in the location are considered to be acceptable in principle and in line with local plan policies. With respect to all of the relevant material planning considerations, including the impact on the character of the area, neighbour amenity and privacy, and highway safety matters, the proposals are considered to be acceptable in such respects for the reasons set out in the report and subject to appropriate planning conditions. For the reasons set out in the report, the proposal is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions for the officer? No. I believe we have a representative of the applicant or the applicant themselves, Rod Hepplethwaite, is that correct?
Chair, yes, that's correct.
Fantastic. You've got 4 minutes to put your case across. Is that okay?
Thank you, Chair.
Fantastic. You can start now.
Good morning, Chair, members. The unit in question has essentially stood vacant since the completion of the Saxon redevelopment in January 2017, other than a brief 3-month period when it was occupied by a florist before that business failed. That's a period of over 3.5 years. This proposal will enable the unit to be brought back into beneficial use. Moreover, the proposal will have a beneficial impact upon the character and appearance and long-term viability of the Saxon local centre and will provide a small-scale social and leisure facility for local residents. The Comprehensive Officer Report considers fully the relevant material planning considerations, and Mr James has just summarised those. The report concludes that development is acceptable in planning terms, subject to conditions with which my client, the applicant, is entirely content. I appreciate that a number of local residents have objected. However, and significantly, none of the technical consultees raised objections to the proposed development. And I think just as the officer report concludes, it is considered that the principle of development at this location is acceptable and that the proposal will not result in significant adverse impacts on the amenity or privacy of neighbouring land users or adverse visual impacts. The proposal is indeed entirely compliant with the relevant policies of the Hartlepool Local Plan and with relevant paragraphs of the National Planning Policy Framework. The OSA recommendation for approval is welcomed, and it is hoped that committee members will agree with it and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from members for the applicant? We don't have an objector, do we? There's no objection. No ward members want to speak on this? No. General debate? No request for general debate. Okay, the recommendation by the officer is to approve this application. We'll go to a roll call, and it's for, against, or abstain the approval of this application. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll start with Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
For.
Councillor Brewer isn't here. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Moore. Councillor Moore. Thank you. Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Lindridge.
For.
Councillor Loynes.
For.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
For.
Councillor Stokel.
For.
And Councillor Young.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Okay, that application has been approved. Thank you very much, and we'll move on to the next item. Item 2, 50 Grange Road. Dan, have you got the report there?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I'll just start this. Thank you, Chair. The item starts on page 13 of the PowerPoint and that of members' handout. The site relates to 50 Grange Road. Planning permission is sought for a change of use from a small house in multiple occupation, which is for up to 6 people, to a larger house in multiple occupation, which are taking the number of rooms from 6 to 8, which is a sui generis use class. No external alterations are proposed as part of this application. The proposal is set out in full within the committee report. Before members on the screen, here we have the block plans, and then the existing elevations, which shows a 3-storey building with offshoots, with the existing floor plans. As I say, the key difference is the addition of 2 bedrooms. Here we have existing views of the front, the property with the mature hedge. Again, views to the front of the rear elevation, views down to the rear yard area and to the rear alleyway. In terms of the application site, it relates to a 3-storey terrace property on Grange Road. The application has been brought before Planning Committee as more than 2 objections have been received in line with the Council's scheme of delegation. The relevant planning history is set out within the committee report. The application has been advertised in the usual manner as set out in the report, and to date there have been 6 objections and 1 letter of support. These objections are summarised in paragraph 2.7 of the committee report. Since the publication of the report, an additional representation has been received. Concerns raised include there are too many HMOs in the area and antisocial behaviour. It's not considered that these raise any additional concerns or matters that have not already been considered and addressed within the report. Turning to consultations, no objections have been received from technical consultees as detailed within the committee report. In respect to the main planning considerations identified in the report, the host dwelling is currently in use as a small HMO for up to 6 people. As such, the general principle of residential development in this location is considered to be acceptable in principle. In terms of changing to a larger HMO, it's considered that the additional 2 bedrooms to form a large HMO would not result in any unacceptable adverse impacts, as detailed within the report. It's also worth noting a similar proposal at Park Road was recently allowed at appeal following the refusal of the application by the council. Within the appeal, a number of key reasons for allowing the appeal were the host property would retain its current appearance and setup, and there would be no adverse impact on the character of the area. There was no evidence that the existing HMO had led to an increase in noise disturbance, more than a typically large family or a small HMO. The site did not have higher than average figures for crime and antisocial behaviour, and we managed through the appropriate channels. And in the event of additional residents, in terms of additional car owners, the main street allowed for parking that would not disrupt the flow of traffic, and therefore the appeal was allowed. In view of the reasons set out in the committee report, this proposal is considered to be acceptable and is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Loynes.
Chair. Can you just clarify a couple of things? I noticed that one of the objections was that the, until I find it, about the extension on the rear would obstruct refuse wagons. Does the extension actually go beyond the boundary wall? Because I didn't think it did.
Thank you, Councillor. The extension that's referenced in the objection and as detailed within the proposal section of the report was actually omitted during the course of the application, so that doesn't actually form part of the application and there are no external alterations. So when that objection was received, it was in respect of the original submission, which did include an extension. So however, that was later withdrawn during the course of the application as detailed in the proposal section. Thank you.
Okay. And also, again, can you clarify that the bathrooms, there's a couple of the rooms won't have bathrooms. It'll be like a communal bathroom.
In answer to that question, well, it is a house in multiple occupation, so the users may sort of share sort of facilities. A small HMO, which is for up to 6 people, you can change from a house, a normal residential house, to a HMO without requiring planning permission on the basis that the similarities of how the two function. In terms of this application, they're adding 2 bedrooms, and what is of note is that even the government guidance states when you go from a small HMO to a large HMO, whilst that is a different use class, it then comes down to the material, whether there's a material sort of change of use in terms of the impacts arising from that. To take it back to your question about the bedrooms and bathrooms, it said they're being considered by relevant consultees and no objections have been received in that respect.
And will it be for single people rather than couples?
I'm not sure. In answer to your question, Councillor, the use class wouldn't dictate that, as you say. I guess the bedroom sizes and the layout may, but in terms of this planning application, it certainly wouldn't be restricting the use to as we can't do for a type of family or size of family.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
Yes, were the people notified in Milton Road about this application? With regards to notifications.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't have the neighbour notifications to hand. As set out in the application, it was advertised by 21 neighbour letters and a site notice and a press advert. So again, as I previously indicated, it was certainly we've gone over and above the required consultations, and I would consider that the consultations to be satisfactory. We'll have consulted all adjacent and adjoining properties, and within advertising 21 neighbours will have gone beyond that.
Just one more question? Have the recommendations by the police?
For liaison officer, they tend to provide advice regarding secured by design and making sure that the properties are safe. Those are matters that have been put forward in this instance will be relayed to the.
Right. Okay.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I think Dan might have just kind of answered one of the queries I had, and I know this. I appreciate I'm not a permanent member of this committee, but on previous committees I've sat in, I know Councillor James has raised this on numerous occasions. The recommendation from the Cleveland Fire Brigade, where they talk about their commitment for the installation of automatic fire suppression systems, and that they have a recommendation in there that they would urge the client for the installation to install sprinklers or a suitable AFS system. That doesn't appear in any of the the conditions set out within the report for approval. Is that because we don't have a policy in which we can enforce that, Dan?
Thank you, Councillor. So, following, as you say, it's a matter that's been raised over the last couple of years, and following that, the council sort of adopted, or the committee adopted a position where certain types of development that could be potentially vulnerable, such as houses in multiple occupation, what the sort of adopted position would be is that we would consult Cleveland Fire Brigade on such applications, take on board their comments, relay those comments back to the applicant, and feed that response back to members as part of this. So at paragraph 2.38 and 2.39, they've provided advice which would be relayed to the applicant by an informative, but notwithstanding their position, and obviously that of the council planning committee's previously adopted position on sprinklers, we've asked the applicant whether they would be providing sprinklers, and they have confirmed that their intention is to take on board the advice of the fire authority, but the matter would be considered through the building regulations process. And ultimately, this is a building regulations matter beyond the remit of the local planning authority. So we followed this sort of adopted position that on certain types of application, we would consult Cleveland Fire Brigade, our building control section, relay those comments back to the applicant and ask if they would be installing sprinklers, and then feed that information back to members. So just to sort of conclude, though, that wouldn't result in us conditioning this as part of the application.
Okay, thank you. Doesn't seem. Oh, Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. As I've been named, I think that I may need to remind members and the public that I actually represent Hartlepool Borough Council on Cleveland Fire Authority. And I'm quite happy with the way that the report is structured, because it gives the leeway. And to be fair, building regulations has much more political and corporate sort of responsibilities that are much more enforceable. So I'm quite happy that the recommendation remains as it is, and that work has been done behind the scenes with Cleveland Fire Authority.
Okay, thank you, Councillor James. We have a representative of the applicant or the applicant, Claire Hatton. Are you there, Claire?
Yes, I am, Chair.
Fantastic. You've got 4 minutes to put your case across. I'll let you start when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to address the committee on behalf of the applicant. We welcome the officer's support for the proposed development and agree with the report and its recommendation. In terms of residential amenity, it is important for committee members and local residents to know the applicant is seeking to market the property as a professional house share. Although there is a potential to introduce greater levels of activity with an approval for a larger HMO, the proposal is only for 2 additional bedrooms, which would not result in a significant increase from the previous level of occupancy. As landlord, the applicant will have direct management over the property, its maintenance and potential future tenants. It is anticipated that this approach will address the concerns raised by the public in relation to potential noise, disturbance, antisocial behaviour and crime. We note that no objections are raised by the Council's Traffic and Transport team. Its representation acknowledged the potential for the proposal to increase parking demand, but confirmed residents living in a shared property such as this in general have low car ownership. The application site is also within a sustainable location and is within easy walking distance to a range of shops, services and facilities, including good public transport. These services will connect residents to other areas of the region, giving them more extensive offer of facilities and services, including employment, retail and leisure opportunities. Comments have been made from public protection in terms of soundproofing to party walls. The applicant is happy to accept a planning condition to provide this. Similarly, the applicant has confirmed it is their intention to take on board the advice from the Fire Authority through the building regulations process. And in terms of advice provided by Cleveland Police, these matters are covered by the HMO licence, to which the applicant will adhere to. The applicant is aware that other properties in Grange Road have been converted to HMOs in recent years and appreciates that concerns raised by local residents. However, the proposed use is a residential one comprising of a previous HMO for up to 6 people. The proposed development adds 2 bedrooms and will be for a maximum of 8 people. On this basis, the development is in keeping with the general character of the area. It is important to note that the application has changed since it was originally submitted. Changes were made to proposals following concerns raised by the Council's Heritage and Countryside Manager. There was concerns that the single-storey rear extension to provide additional communal living and dining space would alter the historic plot boundaries of the terrace and so impact on the significance of the conservation area. The proposal in its current state requires no external alterations to facilitate the change of use. The amended plans have addressed the concerns raised by the Council on heritage grounds, as noted in the officer's report, as well as from members of the public and the civic society. To conclude, the proposed change of use will not result in adverse impacts on residential amenity, visual amenity, the conservation area, or community safety. The application site is in a sustainable location with good access to services and facilities, including public transport. We would therefore sincerely appreciate the committee approving the proposed development, and I would be happy to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor James.
Hello. Can I ask a couple of questions, really? First of all, the one that was based on what Councillor Loynes has already asked, the officer. You say that this will be an 8-bedroom property and that there'll be 8 occupants. Therefore, I take that to be single occupancy, not couples. But will it be mixed gender? Because there is a little bit of a concern about sharing bathrooms with people who are not actually your family.
Thank you, Councillor. As I can confirm, it will be for the use will be for up to 8 bedrooms, but the specifics of whether it will be mixed genders for the bathroom, I'm unclear at this stage, and I'm not sure if it will be something that would be detailed in any planning approval.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
You know, it's been reported that there's a low intake of people with cars, but can you guarantee that the people that are living there will not have cars in the future? You know, if we go back 20 years ago, most people didn't have cars, but that's not the case now. So how can you guarantee that people who are living there won't have cars in the future?
Thank you. I appreciate this point. As say the comments from the council's transport team indicate that properties such as this do have low car ownership. But I appreciate that if it's going to be marketed to professionals, that instead of students, that is potentially on paper a higher level of car ownership. But to reiterate, the property itself is in a very sustainable location. Easy access on foot to services and amenities as well as public transport. But also in terms of if committee members thought it was necessary, the applicant is also open to putting a management agreement in place to ensure that not all residents will have a car. So if that is something that the committee feel is necessary, that's something that the applicant is open to.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, sorry, Dan, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I guess just to add to what the Claire's agent has just been advising, that what Highways have sort of concluded is that they expect a similar parking demand from the property remained as a single residential property. They've also concluded that residents with cars would have to obtain resident permits and park in adjacent streets. And the view of our Highways section is that they don't have any objections on this basis.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Councillor Lindridge.
Thanks, Chair. Could I ask Claire, in terms of tenancy and sort of potential ESB with the increase from 6 to 8, have you got any? Do you vet your tenants in terms of noise and the background? What preventative measures have you, or can you call on in terms of if there was any continual ESB? Do you have any? Can you invoke anything to say that you're breaking the agreement so that you can ensure that neighbours can have a decent noise level in the surrounding area?
Yeah, thank you. I understand there were some historic issues around antisocial behaviour with the property, but can just to confirm that the applicant has 20 HMO properties in Darlington, all of which are professional house shares. So he has an excellent track record of managing these types of properties. So he will adhere to the HMO licence as required. And also in this state, he has management over what tenants go into the property as well. So I do not perceive any problems going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Carl Richardson, could you just put mute on your microphone, please? I think we're getting a bit of feedback from your councillor. Any ward members who are looking to speak on this application? No. General debate? No general debate.
Oh. Sorry.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
Yes, Chair. I am not happy about this application whatsoever. I think there has a lot of the residents, and I know this area quite well, a lot of the residents are not happy about it, and there is a fear of crime. There is also a fear that there will be a major issue as regards parking. And I know people might say that there's no car issues at the moment, but I'm talking about the future. In that particular area, it's very difficult to get parking permits because it's it's residential permits there already. This could have an impact on Tankerville Street and other areas. So I'm not happy with this proposal whatsoever. Okay. And I kind of say I would like to move that we not approve this application.
Is there a seconder for that? That motion's not carried. Okay, so the officer's recommendation is therefore for approval. We'll go to Joe for the roll call. So this application is for approval. For, against, or abstain. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay, we'll start with Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Moore.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Lindridge.
For.
Councillor Loynes.
For.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
Against.
Councillor Stokel.
For.
And Councillor Young.
For.
Thank
That
you.
application has been approved. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, which is item 3. And that's 21 Hillcrest Grove in Elwick Village. And I'll give Dan a second just to get ready. And thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Chair. The item starts at page 25 of the PowerPoint and that of your handout, members. The site relates to 21 Hillcrest Grove. This application seeks consent to completely remove the one mature sycamore tree covered by a tree preservation order at 21 Hillcrest Grove, as identified on the slide before, members, by the green T1 sign and with the red circle on this plan here. The applicant's reasons for doing so are summarised in paragraph 3.11 of the committee report, including damage to buildings and property. The applicant's supporting details include a building survey report dated September 2019 that has again been submitted to accompany the application. The same report accompanied the previously refused application H 2019-0423 and the recently dismissed appeal decision. The proposal includes the applicant's other supporting documents, and this is set out in full within the committee report. Hillcrest Grove is situated at the end.
Sorry, Dan, I'm getting a bit of feedback in my ear. Can Councillor Lindridge and Councillor Carl Richardson turn their microphones on silent, please? There's just a bit of a feedback loop going on in my ear.
Apologies, Chair.
No, that's fine. It's okay. Thanks very much. Sorry, Dan.
Hillcrest Grove is situated at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac leading off North Lane and situated east of St Peter's Primary School. The site occupies an elevated position, and the one sycamore tree that this application relates to is considered to be readily visible from an area of the road frequented by the public and forms part of the high tree canopy in Elwick Village. Before, members, here are some historic Google Street images from 2009 with views looking from north to south along Hillcrest Grove. Again, a view close up. This is a view taken from the south from Greenlee, looking to the north, the tree identified. The arboricultural officer and case officer has visited the site, and the following photos are recent photos of vantage points to the tree. Again, here we see the tree very prominent within Hillcrest. This is another view from Greenlee. As you can see, it extends above the property before us. Views from North Lane, as identified by the red arrow on the screen. And a view from the paddock, again, extending above the skyline of the adjacent buildings. The application has been brought before Planning Committee after being called in by local ward councillors in line with the council's scheme of delegation. The relevant planning history is set out in full within the committee report. This includes the background to the tree that the current application relates to being formally protected through a tree preservation order in 1994 and has remained protected ever since. The planning history also includes an application received in September 2019 for the felling of the same tree that this current application relates to. The application reference H2019-0423 was refused by way of officer delegation on the grounds that the applicant had failed to demonstrate that the removal of the protected tree was justified, and therefore the proposed removal of the tree would result in an unacceptable adverse loss of visual amenity for the area. The applicant appealed the council's decision, which was recently dismissed at appeal by the planning inspector. The appeal decision forms part of the items for information reports within today's agenda, item 5.1. Within the appeal decision, the inspector concluded, quote, "As observed during my site visit, is the scale of the tree which is at odds, which adds to its prominence and consequent contribution to the character of the area. With any application to remove a protected tree, a balancing exercise needs to be undertaken. The essential need for works applied for must be weighed against the resultant loss of the visual amenity of the area. Insufficient justification for the course of action has not been demonstrated." In terms of publicity, the application has been advertised by way of neighbour letters, and to date 3 letters of support have been received, and they're summarised in paragraph 3.17 of the committee report. 1 letter of objection has also been received and is summarised in paragraph 3.18 of the committee report. Consultation responses are also set out within the committee report at paragraph 3.19. The main planning considerations are identified within the report, and in particular the potential impact of the visual amenity of the surrounding area as a result of the loss of the protected tree, having regard to the reasons and information put forward by the applicant in support of their application and whether or not the proposal is justified. Firstly, the applicant contends that the tree in question does not contribute to the visual amenity of the area. In response, officers are of the view that the amenity value of this tree is that it enhances the street scene through its size and form and its contribution to the village setting. The tree is readily visible from a number of vantage points within the area, as clearly illustrated on the slideshow photos before members this morning. The removal of this large tree would therefore result in the loss of a mature tree canopy that punctuates this part of the street and contributes to the visual amenity of the area. As noted in the recently dismissed appeal decision for the removal of the same tree, the inspector highlighted the prominence of the tree, commenting that the tree is, quote, "clearly visible in longer views south-east of Hillcrest Grove towards the property and above the rooftops within the paddock and Greenlee. From these viewpoints, the tree, due to its height, stature and prominent position, adds to the verdant and sylvan character of the area. As noted above, the tree has been protected for 26 years using the tree evaluation method for preservation orders used by many local authorities, and this tree scores 21 out of 25, with the recommendation that it definitely merits a tree preservation order. As such, the loss of the tree would be contrary to the provisions of Local Plan Policy NE1, which states that trees of amenity value will be protected. Within the appeal decision, the inspector is in agreement that, quote, "the loss of the tree would result in an unacceptable harm to the character and appearance of the area, to which I give significant weight. Any reasons to justify its removal therefore need to be compelling." Moving on, and in this context, National Planning Practice Guidance states that applicants must provide reasons for proposed work. They should demonstrate that the proposal is a proportionate solution to their concerns and meets the requirements of sound arboriculture. It is important that applicants suggesting that proposed tree work is necessary to address tree-related subsidence damage are properly supported by appropriate information. This is also a requirement of Regulation 14 of the Tree Preservation Order Regulations. As previously indicated, the application is accompanied by the same building survey report that was submitted to accompany the previously refused application and the associated dismissed appeal decision. The building survey report is considered by the Council's arboricultural officer to feature a number of omissions. No exploratory or invasive tests have been carried out to determine the extent of the roots where they are alleged to be present, and if they are present, then these need to be excised or the foundations made good to accommodate them without resorting to the destruction and total loss of the tree. There has also been a lack of monitoring to ascertain if subsidence was fluctuating over summer and winter months, which would ascertain any differential settlement of the ground beneath the foundations. As part of the aforementioned and recently dismissed appeal decision for the removal of the same tree in question, when considering the applicant's submitted support and building survey report, the inspector considered this but was also dismissive of the findings, commenting, whether or not the tree is removed, remedial work to the garage would be required. No substantive evidence of a causal relationship has been advanced. I give little weight to this document. Furthermore, with respect to the applicant's concerns to safety as a result of any cracks in the flooring, the planning inspector commented, quote, for those concerns to carry any weight in favour of the tree's removal, substantive evidence that the tree is causing floor cracks that hinder access would be required. This has simply not been provided. It is therefore considered that none of the applicant's additional supporting documents further their argument to justify the removal of the tree, and as such, it is considered that the applicant has again failed to satisfy the provisions of policy QP6, namely that the impact on protected trees should be investigated and satisfactorily addressed. In this instance, and for the reasons identified, the LPA officers, are of the view that the applicant has again failed to demonstrate that there is justification and mitigating circumstances for the tree's removal. As such, it's considered that the removal would result in an unacceptable adverse loss of visual amenity for the surrounding area. Officers would reiterate the conclusions of the inspector and dismissed appeal, namely that, quote, the lack of substantive evidence linking movement in the garage to the tree, in addition to the lack of thorough investigation of alternative course of action, provide inadequate justification for the removal of this tree. For the reasons set out in the report, the proposal is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Lyons.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, Dan. You say that the floor to the garage isn't associated with the tree at the roots, but can you tell me who made that accusation or report? Was it an actual qualified engineer, or was it just the planning officer? And also, you state in the it's in, where did I find it, 3.17, that to date 3 numbers of support have been received and 1 of objection, yet these that were supplied to us, and I believe everybody's got one, there's 17 that have said no objection and 1 against. So can you tell me why it was omitted from the report? Because it looks like there's only 3 people that's objected when actually there's 17 according to this.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. In terms of your second point, the paragraph 3.13 of the committee report provides details of the applicant submitted supporting evidence. That relates to where the applicant has provided a list of support where it appears they've obviously contacted residents and asked for their views, emphasising that the removal of the tree was supported by Elwick Parish Council from the previous application. Those comments didn't form part of the formal consultation process of this application. What I would also add, and has been, as I've stressed throughout the report, the visual amenity of the tree is of a high amenity value. Whether residents by a straw poll of the applicant consider that isn't of visual amenity, that doesn't justify, in accordance with national planning policy and the regulations, for the loss of this tree. The tree's been protected for 26 years, and at the moment there's no sound grounds to do so. They have to provide sufficient justification for why the tree needs to be removed. The survey of residents who have commented that they're in support of that would not address or overcome that view. Officers' view is clear, and as I've illustrated through the slideshow, the tree is very prominent for a number of areas. It scores highly on the tree preservation order assessment, and there's no sound reasons for its removal. In terms of your first question, if it's okay with the chair, I would defer that question back to the arboricultural officer and case officer Derek Wardle to answer that, please.
Derek, are you there?
Hello, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, what we do occasionally throughout the year get insurance claims coming in. One of the things that we ask for is monitoring. It's quite well, it's a process that we really need as a local authority to see. As part of the existing regulations on trees, when people are putting claims in for removal or challenging an adverse decision, if you want to call it that, is monitoring of the soil. I mean, right the way back, that garage should have been constructed to to avoid future complications with it and also protect the tree. And where I'm coming from is purely to protect the tree. I'm not involved with the building design or anything like that. That's another area. But we do need to know whether or not that, other than physical movement of the road, the floor hasn't been excavated. The inspector on the decision, on the appeal decision, actually mentioned that monitoring hadn't taken place, and that's something we would expect to see as a local authority if we're going to concede to that. So that's where I'm coming from on that. I'm not a structural engineer. I can see and I know and I deal with structural engineers, and they back me up, and I've sought their advice in the past. But on this particular instance, that's a reason why we ask. It's a general survey that's been carried out on the garage, the sort of thing that you would do maybe for a house survey, but monitoring has not been carried out. It's not just the tree, it's the type of soil underneath it, the depth of the foundations, has it been constructed correctly? All these things need to be brought into the equation. So that's all I can say really on that aspect, if that answers the councillor's question. Thank you.
Just one additional question. What was our structural engineer's report about the area then, if you sought advice on this particular tree? What was our engineer's viewpoint?
We haven't brought an engineer in. It hasn't got to got to that. That would be a whole different field.
What's the waiting for the point in time we bring a structural engineer in? What would be your waiting on that? Like,
I would expect, Chair, that the it asks on the Treeworks application that they have to provide a detailed engineer's report, and that would include monitoring whether or not the cracks are opening up or shrinking, and also the type of soil. That's not something we would carry out, although I'd probably refer it to our structural engineers once it came in. A lot of the things at the moment is purely visual. It says itself in the report.
I'm still struggling to see at what point we would decide whether we needed to engage our structural engineer. But I'll take that point. I appreciate that there's a list of councillors who want to come in at this point, including 2 officers. But as we have an engineer on the call at the minute, Kieran Bostock, one of our officers, I'll bring him in at this point.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we would only involve our structural engineer if there was a danger to our highways or any council land. We could offer advice to the applicant in terms of monitoring processes, but as it's a private property, the first instance would be for them to commission their own surveys. And they could liaise for statutory advice from our structural engineer, but we would only accept and send an inspection if there was a danger to a council asset.
Okay. And so was that offered to this particular applicant, or was it not offered to this particular applicant?
I don't believe it would have been offered, because it would be for the applicant, because there's no danger to the council's highway or council assets at this stage. So it would be for the applicant to seek out our structural engineer. We're currently in the process of appointing a new structural engineer, so they'll be in post from September. So they can advise if this monitoring is to go forward, depending on the outcome of committee today. I can by all means put the 2 parties in contact, and we can start that monitoring process.
Okay, thanks, Kieran. Councillor Lindridge.
Thanks, Chair. I think part of my questions have been answered by Kieran and I forgot your name, Derek. Yeah, I did notice on 3.3 it said that whether or not the tree is removed, remedial work to the garage would be required. Yeah, one of my questions would be, has there been there's been no exploratory work to support the removal? I think that's important, that, yeah. I would think this may be to an officer. In your opinion, the officer's opinion, would you anticipate any remedial work to support the removal of the tree to be extensive? And if that was the case, would that support a further appeal if that was done? If it was anticipated that.
I think it will be difficult to draw an officer's opinion on that, to be honest, Councillor Lindridge, because it
and would it be
down the line?
Yeah, and would it be a necessary requirement to proceed? Because obviously it could be quite expensive, couldn't it?
Absolutely.
I personally think, you know, you don't need this exploratory work in order to make a decision like this. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Lindridge. Kieran, I think, wants to come back on that though, so I'll let him come back in.
Yeah, I think it's just important to point out that the removal of a tree of this nature isn't a solution. It can have more destabilising effects because it upsets the equilibrium of the soil itself. So you could find by removing the tree, the cracks aren't going to heal themselves. Remedial work will still be required, but you could find that you then bring on more problems because the soil properties and parameters change.
Thanks, Kieran. Councillor Lyons.
Thank you, Chair. I think probably.
Can other people turn the microphones on to mute, please? That'd be useful. Thank you.
I think this might be for Derek, this question. Although, Dan, you might be able to answer it, or Kieran. Do you not think that 25 plus years ago, when the TPO was put on the tree, it would have been significantly smaller because it's less than 2 meters away from the house, the actual house. And looking at the actual photographs recently took, I don't know how recent they've been taken, of the garage floor, but I first saw the garage floor, it would be coming up to 2 years ago, and the cracks were nowhere near like that. So it's rather, the girth of the tree has grown significantly over the last 25, 26 years or whatever. Could you just confirm that, please?
Sorry, yes, Councillor. The tree has grown, but it was a mature tree when that house was built. I mean, that tree is on par with the ones on the village green and elsewhere in North Lane, in the surrounding area, and everything. Really, again, it goes back to when planning permission was granted. My first remit is purely to protect the tree. How people go about building next to it is another issue. I would expect our architect to build in the appropriate foundations. You can build trees. We have guidelines at the moment to protect, and again, I'm coming from protecting the tree, not the other way around. That's a building control issue. So the tree's grown quite happily. There's protection measures put in at the time, nothing to go or damage the root system. The garage was being built on the as a rebuild on the footing of an existing garage, albeit smaller. And really, from there, that is, you know, if people want to build something close to a tree, it can build it. But please build the appropriate foundations. There's beams you can put in. I can give plenty of examples of trees around the town where we have that, where we have trees. And I think very carefully that if we make a decision to take this tree out, there's a pile of people out there queuing up for exactly the same reason. And I've got 6 at the moment that I'm dealing with, tree preservation orders. I have to go on the regulations, which is the trees regulations 2012, which is part of the Town and Country Planning Act. And that is what I'm going on. My gut feeling doesn't come into it. It's either black or white. And that's, we could make a dangerous precedent by allowing perfectly good trees where construction hasn't been followed. We're going to be losing an awful lot in this town. Really, that's where I'm coming from.
Derek,
Thank you.
Can you just come back on there then? So what would it take to remove a TPO then from a tree? Are we able to do that? And obviously, when the you know, you're saying about the building work, when that had been approved by, I presume, our planning committee, of which I wasn't part of then, and I'm sure a lot of the planning committee weren't on the planning committee at the time, surely that would have all been taken in by the actual architects and the planning committee at the time.
I would have thought so. I mean, we had quite a respected case officer at the time, well, very well respected, dealing with this case at the time. and she never left any stone unturned. So I presume everything from my side, again, my only involvement was the tree and the retention of the tree or protection of it. All the other aspects I don't get involved with. Removing the tree preservation order, well, I mean, I've got to say that on this one, well, it's gone through to try and remove it. It's gone to appeal. The appeal has been dismissed on this particular case, and anything. Feel free. Look at the 2012 trees regulations under Article 14, which Dan mentioned in his presentation. Every single sentence on that, not one area is this tree falls into for removal. And I think our policies, the way we approach this in future, our policies on tree planting, we're going to have to give them very, very careful thought if we allow a perfectly good, old, almost veteran tree in Elwick to be removed. And that's my angle on it, Councillor. That's all really I can say on that one. But I am going black and white from the trees regulation. My emotions or anything else doesn't come into it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Just really following on from Councillor Loyne's question there, that Councillor Loyne's mentioned the planning permission would have obviously been granted by this authority. Would not building regulations have been checked by this authority as well to make sure that the foundations were adequate for the building that was erected? And if that's the case, why has this chap in question ended up with this problem?
Is that one you can answer, Dan? Sorry.
I can answer that. I would refer members back to.
Regs, I don't get involved with the building regs.
Yeah. Sorry, Derek. 3.4 of the report sets out the history of that extension, and it makes clear that as part of the granting of planning permission, the tree was to be retained and the foundations were to be of the correct design to be built without damaging it. Planning condition on the permission was also to protect the tree during construction work was required by ensuring that appropriate measures were put in place so that it was not damaged during construction. A building regulations application, I understand, was submitted, and the onus would have been on the applicant to ensure compliance with that. So as I say, as Derek and the report sort of labours, the point where we're at now is the removal of this tree may not be the solution to the sort of alleged damage that's happening to the property. Further exploratory work needs to be undertaken and monitored, and the onus is on the applicant to do so. If they obviously want to liaise with us in the future, and as Kieran's mentioned, an inspector, then that's something we can look into. But at this moment in time, with the onus being on the applicant, that simply hasn't been demonstrated. So that's sort of officer's view.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate that, Dan, and I appreciate the onus is on the applicant to make sure the foundations are correct. But is there not also onus on our authority to monitor and regulate that them foundations are correctly done at the time? I know in experience I've had, we've had various inspections throughout the foundation build, i.e. when the hole was dug, the hole checked, then the first half of the fill checked, and then the finished product. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody want to come back on that?
As I say, I understand there was a building regulations application from my discussions with Derek, and we can only presume that the matter was followed through correctly. It's as simple as that.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we'll go to the applicant. I believe Mick Stevenson is on the call. You have 4 minutes with which to put your case across. Are you there?
Good morning, everybody. And thank you very much for the questions you've been asking, because you've actually asked a lot of questions that I was going to raise. As you've seen, totally biased report. He's actually admitted it himself there, saying he's got no other interest other than the preservation of that particular tree. Mr. Brown has asked a question there about the planning and the building control. Well, yes, when buildings are controlled, your inspectors actually go out there and charge a fee for every inspection to give their professional advice and guidance. Yet all we're getting now is that it probably wasn't done. So these are just a couple of the matters that I'm dealing with. Now, the reasons for refusal that I've made notes of there. You've quoted local plan CC14. Well, you know what? You're actually contradicting your own report, because if you apply CC14, it talks about climate change. In your report, you have an ecology officer who's got no issues with this tree removal. So you're contradicting his comments. Local plan NE1 items 7 and 8, the natural environment. Actually, that supports my claim. Mr. Wardle's just omitted to mention the parameters regarding trees and distance from properties. Just to remind him that it says in your own plan, trees should, so look, item 7 in NE1 mentions a buffer for veteran trees. This should be maintained 15 times the stem diameter or 5 metres beyond the drip line, which is the end leaf dropping water. This tree has a diameter of 1 metre. It's only 2 metres, less than 2 metres from the garage. Looking at your own guidelines, it should be 15 metres away. Item 8 within NE1 7 and 8 refers to replacement trees. I've offered to put replacement trees in there. So I'm compliant with the things, the very reasons why you're actually saying refuse this application. QP6 in the local plan, QP6 item 4 refers to development and Hartlepool Borough Council working with developers to overcome issues. He's clearly said, I'm not interested in the issues, just the preservation of the tree. There's been no liaison with me during this application. I've had no visit from a case officer or anybody else from Hartlepool Borough Council, despite numerous applications and claims. The report talks about 2 previous applications being refused. They were refused by the very man that's just been on there saying his only interest is the preservation of a tree. In the previous ones, and known on the photographs that we've just seen, visual amenity isn't something that 1 or 2 people can decide on. The planning committee can decide on what is a visual amenity, and therefore, if there's any significant loss to the village if the tree is removed. The photographs themselves that you've just shown that were taken by the case officer, they show that this particular tree stands vastly higher than anything else around it. And it's the very height of the tree which causes the problem. That's where the roots are coming in. As for the engineer's report,
5 seconds left. Sorry, I meant to give you a
as for the engineer's report, you've just discounted that. It's a professional engineer that came out and looked at this, and on the balance of probabilities, not beyond all reasonable doubt, on the balance of probabilities, everybody who's looked at this agrees that the tree roots are the cause of the damage in the garage. So,
okay, Chair, that's your time, I'm afraid. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's a shame it's a meeting like this. I'd rather it was a place where we can battle this backwards and forwards, but thank you very much for your time, and I'm sorry if I feel emotional, but it is an emotional topic for myself.
Okay, thanks, sir. Thank you. Must apologise to members. I was listening intently and I wasn't really looking at the clock there, so apologies for that. It went over by 15 seconds for the record. Any questions from members to the applicant? Sorry, Dan. Dan wants to come back in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points made by the applicant. In respect of his comments about the ecologist is purely looking at the matter in terms of the impact on wildlife, nothing to do with the tree preservation order regulation. So that's not a matter. I think Derek Wardle is an excellent arboriculture officer that's sort of served this town, and there's Derek's an utmost professional, and to sort of the allegations that he's taken this matter professional, you know, I think Derek's applied, what he was emphasising is that he's considered the application against the appropriate regulations and policies, and that's what I wish to emphasise. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Okay, we'll enter into general debate. Any comments in general debate? Councillor Loynes.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start, I love trees. I do love trees, but this tree is absolutely huge. As I've said before, you can't get your arms around it at all, and it's far too close. It's less than 2 meters away from the house, and a lot less distance from the garage as well. So, while I was stood talking to Mr. Stevenson many moons ago, there was actually a bird that deposited quite a large amount of on my shoulder. The house, the side of the house, which unfortunately hasn't been shown on these photographs, and I believe everybody's got a copy of them, was absolutely covered in bird excrement, and it's been newly painted. The cars, as you can see, are covered at a cost of, you know, having to have them repainted or touched up or whatever. And the leaves in the autumn cause a lot of problems for the drains and the brown bin, because Mr. Stevenson's only allowed one small standard brown bin, which does cause a problem. And as Mr. Stevenson said, he has offered to replace the large tree with 1 or 2 smaller ones away from his property. So I can't see there being a problem. As I brought up before, 17 objections on here that obviously Mr. Stevenson did himself that isn't in the report, because looking at the report, there's only 3 objections, which is a bit unfair. So I would say that there's probably 17 plus the 3, so 20 objections as against 20 for the tree to come down than 1 objection for the tree to stay where it is. As I said before, I love trees and I would not like to see a tree felled for any other reason. But in this case, I do believe it should be taken down. Elwick Parish Council have stated clearly that, and I've been to many parish council meetings in the past, that they have no objections to the tree coming down. So what is the problem if Mr. Stevenson agrees to put two smaller trees away from his house? What is the problem with that? Like I said, I don't want to see trees pulled down, but in this circumstances, I think we should be leaning to Mr. Stevenson's problems. And if you take a good look at all these photographs, you can see it towers above. It's one of, I think it is safe to say it is the largest tree in Elwick, and I go up there quite a lot. And it towers above the houses and Mr. Stevenson's house as well. So I'm sorry, I'll be going against the application of refusing the tree.
Thank you, Councillor Loynes. Councillor Storkle.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to commend Mr. Stevenson on his effort that he's put to contact other houses in the area to ask their opinion. As the officers say, they also go above and beyond, and I think Nick has shown that throughout getting this done. As Councillor Loynes said, there has been 17 support responses in what Mr. Stevenson has done, as well as the 3 that HBC have responded. Also, I don't see the problem with removing the tree as long as Mr. Stevenson does replace them with smaller trees. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Storkle. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. I'm absolutely amazed at what's being suggested here. Our officers have made their recommendations known to the occupier of the property. He's appealed against that decision previously. We've had an answer back from a planning inspector that our decision to refuse was correct. And here we are, we've got members saying, oh, well, that doesn't really matter much. Well, if that's what happens, and I will be voting for the recommendation, so can I be quite clear there? If that is not carried, then you will have appeals all over the town, and we will lose a considerable number of tree canopies within Hartlepool, because people will be queuing up behind this application to just put in their own.
Oh, Kieran wants to come in. Kieran, yeah. You're on mute.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, it was just to give the committee once again the assurance that I would ideally like to get the opportunity to get, once I've got a structural engineer appointed, which will be at the start of September, a structural engineer from the council to look into this and begin that monitoring exercise. Because at the moment we only really do have anecdotal evidence, and I'd really like that opportunity to get
which was a point that I've made a couple of times during this application, and I'm a bit baffled that if it was such an important part of this process, somebody should have done something. And I'm kind of I take on board what all members have said, including Councillor James, who's made a really valid point there. But I think we're at a point where it's almost too little, too late. If there was a requirement for or if there was an opportunity for Hartlepool Borough Council to do more in terms of from an engineering perspective, and the fact that the tree is less than 2 meters away from his house and therefore potentially does have an impact on that property, then my concern is that we're a little bit late in the game to be starting to talk about structural engineering reports, and I don't know whether the members would have a view on that. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I most certainly would have a view on what you've just said, and I agree with you. I know doesn't happen very often, Mike, but I do agree with what you're saying. This tree appears from what were to be a nuisance on many fronts. You know, apart from the fact it's damaging his garage, but it's so close that the next step will be his property, or is very probably the case. And the fact of the droppings, you know, with this huge tree hanging over probably many areas he has to pass through or sit in, yeah, I think you're very right, Chair, in what you said.
Okay. Councillor Lindridge.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I am concerned the fact that we could be setting a precedent here by removing the tree. Yeah. Because this could open the floodgates, as Councillor James has said. However, right, I think, bearing in mind Mr. Stevenson's remarks, I fully understand, and he presented his case well, in my view, and I think this leads to, and I want to move that we have further discussions with case officers. I don't think it's too late. It's important. And it's important for our constitution to see we follow up and give residents and officers the opportunities to put the cases forward appropriately. So I'm going to move that it's either delayed or we have further discussions with case officers to have discussions with Mr. Stevenson to get the best outcome, the most appropriate. And I don't think it's too late in the day. I think we need to do what is right. Thanks, Chair. So
okay,
if somebody seconds me.
Councillor Lindridge, so just to be clear, Councillor Lindridge, you're proposing that we defer this application on the basis of further investigations of that particular site?
Yes.
Councillor James.
I'd like to second that motion.
Okay, I think we need. Sorry, Councillor James.
And I was going to say I want to second that motion because I think that's some common sense being spoken there. We're only a few weeks away from the beginning of September. And I'm sure that Kieran will make sure that this is a priority issue for the officer coming into post. So we could be talking about as little as monitoring over a 6-month period. So by Easter next year, it could actually be all resolved one way or another. There is actually no evidence to say that the tree is responsible for any damage. And to be fair, it shouldn't have waited for a borough council paid for engineer to carry out that survey. Mr. Stevenson could have engaged a structural engineer of his own.
Councillor Stevenson, Councillor James, Mr. Stevenson said in his comments that he did provide a report.
And all of that information has still not persuaded a nationally employed planning inspector to approve. The decision of the inspector was to reject the appeal. Therefore, I think that we're absolutely digging ourselves a big hole here, because there will be hundreds of trees across Hartlepool that will come in line now to be felled.
Okay, well that motion's been proposed and seconded, and whilst I have my own hesitation regarding it, I think we need to go to a roll call, Joe, to see if we're going to defer this application. So it's for, against, or abstain from deferring this application for further investigative works?
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. We'll start with Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
Against.
I believe we now have Councillor Brewer with us.
We do. He's been here for the full application as well, so he can comment.
Yeah, Councillor Brewer.
Against.
Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Moore. Councillor Moore. I think you're on mute, Councillor.
Yeah, it wouldn't unmute. Sorry, I dropped out for a chunk of this. So
you can't vote. No, if you dropped out, you can't vote.
No problem. Councillor James.
For the motion.
Councillor Lindridge.
For.
Councillor Loynes.
Against. I think we've waited too long.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
Against.
Councillor Stokel.
Against.
And Councillor Young.
Against. So I think that hasn't been carried. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, that motion hasn't carried. Therefore, unless there's any other general debate, Councillor Loynes, do you want to comment further in general debate?
It was just to say that I think we've wasted enough time, although I partly agree. This should have been done beforehand, a lot way back, and I understand the problems with the pandemic and everything, but I do think we've wasted enough time on this, and if you wait another 6 months, that's another 6 months of damage to Mr. Stevenson's property, and who's going to be responsible for that? Could he put a claim against HBC, which could be quite costly if that's the case, and that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Loynes. We'll go to the vote. The officer's recommendation is to refuse the application, so it will be for, against, or abstain in terms of refusal of the application. We'll go to the roll call.
Thank you very much. We'll start with Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
Against.
Councillor Brewer.
Against.
Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Buchan.
Against.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Lindridge.
For.
Councillor Loynes.
Against.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
Against.
Councillor Stokel.
Against.
And Councillor Young.
Against. Okay, so
Chair.
oh yes, Councillor
Right.
James.
Can I request that my vote be recorded in the minutes?
Absolutely, not a problem. Does any other councillor want that as well? Do you want to?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so Councillor Loynes would like a vote to be recorded as well, please. Okay, so we find ourselves going against the officer's recommendation for refusal. Therefore, we need to come up with a reason why. And I think some of those reasons are to do with the distance and potential damage to the property existing and in the future. And I'm not sure whether there's anything else that we need to say or whether they substitute suitable grounds. I might have to bring Tom in on this at this point.
Yeah, can you hear me, Chairman?
I can, yeah.
Okay, I think it is necessary, particularly given that members are going against the inspector's report. It is necessary to come up with some reasons for doing so. Secondly, the applicant did indicate that he was prepared to provide replacement planting on site. So if members are minded to approve his application, then it needs to be subject to a condition that the tree shall not be removed until the replacement planting has been carried out.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Dan, do you want to summarise?
Thanks, Chair. I think, can I just defer that back to Tom to summarise the members' reasons?
Okay, well, have I got mute? Am I on mute, or can you hear me?
We can hear you, Tom.
Okay, well, it's not for me to summarise members' reasons. I think when a member needs to move a motion to approve, that's the first point.
Well, okay, so can a member move?
We seconded, and the member who's moving the motion to approve needs to indicate why they feel that they wish to depart from the inspector's decision and the officer's report. I mean, we've heard a number of points being raised, so that shouldn't be difficult. But
Okay.
From my standpoint, what I would ask the member to do is to also indicate that he or she is happy to recommend that the condition that I've indicated should be imposed on any approval.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to move the motion to approve it, also containing the planting of new trees within the agreement.
And what reasons? We need on record what reasons?
What reasons is just continual damage and continual nuisance, and as was in the report, the hygiene of what this household is suffering with bird droppings.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Stokel.
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stokel. So we're moving to the vote to approve this application, for, against, or abstain, approving this abstaining, approving this application, and we'll go to the roll call, Joe.
Thank you very much. Can we start with Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher, please?
For.
Councillor Brewer.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor James.
Against.
Councillor Lindridge.
Against.
Councillor Loynes.
For.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
For.
Councillor Stokel.
For.
And Councillor Young.
For. That application has been approved. Okay, item 5, items for information. 5.1 probably is null and void now, and we've heard a lot about that appeal in the planning application process that we've just been through. Are there any members who want to indicate a further exploration of that appeal? Councillor Moore. You're on, Councillor Moore.
I wouldn't unmute. Apologies, Chair, not on 5.1. It was on one of the subsequent appeals.
No problem at all. We'll get there in a second, then that's fine. Item 5.2 is appeal at Bathgate Terrace, number 1. Dan.
Yeah, this related to an extension to the side of a property that had been refused by officers under delegated powers. The appeal was allowed by the planning inspector. The appeal is attached, and that's for members to note.
Thanks very much. 5.4, appeal at 11 Queen Street, Dan.
Sorry, Chair, it's the next one's Meadowcroft Mews.
Sorry, apologies. Yeah, I've jumped. Sorry about that. Sorry, Meadowcroft Mews, number 12. Sorry about that.
Yeah, this relates to an extension to one of the 14 Mews-style properties that were built to the rear of Meadowcroft. The application was refused by officers under delegated powers, and the appeal was also dismissed. It's for members to know the outcome of that appeal.
Thank you. 5.4. We're now at 11 Queen Street. Never good at me geography.
Yeah, this relates to the outcome of an appeal against an enforcement notice served by the council in respect of unauthorised windows installed at 11 Queen Street in the Headland. The appeal was dismissed and the enforcement notice was upheld. And again, a copy of the inspector's decision is attached for members' reference.
Thank you. Councillor Moore wants to come in at this point.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I completely respect the inspector's findings on this one. However, I would appeal to the committee, speaking, I guess, as a ward resident, that the applicant is an elderly lady, and I think the requirement for this work to be carried out within 3 months, given the current climate, is a bit unjustified, and I would just request some leniency, and we look to extend that possibly up to a 12-month period, just to allow for the finances and also to allow the contractors to be able to get in place.
I think maybe I hesitate, because obviously it's important that we rectify this situation, but you've highlighted a really key point there, Councillor Moore, in terms of the times that we're in and you know the status of the resident, and maybe 12 months might be even too short in that circumstance. I don't know what other members would think, but I think probably more like 18 months is a fairer situation. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with Shane's comments there. I also respect the officer's recommendation on that. But yeah, I would be more than happy to extend it to 12 months. I suppose, why don't we do 12 months and perhaps with a caveat of another review depending on what the situation is like at that time. Thank you, Chair.
So I think that's been seconded by Councillor Brown there. I think we'll probably go to the roll call on that, please, just to see where. So this. Sorry. Oh, sorry, Dan. Sorry, Dan.
Obviously, noting Councillor Moore and Brown's comments there. It's just to add, members will recall that last year we, as part of a site visit, we went to a number of properties and enforcement notices were served on several properties. A number of those have appealed against the enforcement notice, and the appeal has been dismissed in all occasions. Now, there is another property in question where they had the applications they've had an enforcement notice served on them. And obviously, we officers do bear in mind the current situation. And in such instances, we've allowed 6 months as opposed to the 3. I'm just, from an officer perspective, concerned that the number of properties that other residents are also subject to these works and applying consistency. I say there are a number of properties who haven't approached us for further we need. Well, I would suggest we need to be seen to be consistent, appreciating the personal circumstances of this property. But unfortunately, in planning terms, the occupier, we only have to assess it in black and white, and unauthorised windows have been installed. So I would just sort of add my concerns. I'm not sure if Tom has any sort of further to add on that.
Can I just seek clarity though? When those enforcement notices went out to those residents, was that pre-COVID or post-COVID or during COVID?
All 3. So a number of those appeal decisions have appeared on the last few weeks' worth of committee reports, including a number within Queen Street and on adjacent properties.
Okay, thank you. And again, it's kind of it's trying to assess the different statuses of each resident, I suppose, in that situation. Okay, Councillor Loynes. You're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. I do agree with what's been said by Councillor Moore and yourself, Councillor Young. I think with her being elderly, and knowing, I do know from our own experience of trying to get people in to do work and to try and get the materials as well, because there's a backlog of construction items, and I do believe that we should, if at all possible, delay it for at least 18 months, 12 months to 18 months at least, to give the lady in question time to find somebody and get the finances to replace the windows. So, okay.
Councillor Loynes, Councillor Moore. You're on mute.
Yeah. Sorry, Chair. For some reason, it's taking forever on this tablet today. No, I completely appreciate the comments made by Dan there. I'm just mindful of the fact that whilst I might not have been here for the other applications, the other appeals, obviously we need to look at each one individually. And I'm looking at this one, looking at the individual circumstances and the fact that even if we give 6 months, right now we'd be asking an elderly lady who's clearly stressing about finances, we'll be putting her under undue stress as we're going into a winter. And I can tell you from experience, anybody growing up on the Headland will tell you, you do not want to be replacing your windows in the middle of winter.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. Councillor James.
Yes, can I appreciate the conversation that's taking place and the suggestions that are being made, Chair. But again, I do think that we need to be very careful that we don't set a precedent here, which means our officers will not be able to enforce. I think that if we leave it at 3 months, I think Dan and the other officers present have heard what members have suggested. And I'm sure that, to be fair, where there are mitigating circumstances, extra time is given. It's for the resident to raise those issues with our officers and then for our officers to make those decisions. But I would be very concerned if we actually gave a hard and fast 8 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever it might be. Because once we move from that normal 3-month window, then the fact that this is an elderly lady that may be on hard times financially, it doesn't make any difference. Legally, you give the same right to everybody, whether they're rich or poor. So I think that we should guide our officers in how we feel, which I think all members have done that have spoken. And I think our officers should take that into account when they are talking with and making arrangements with members of the public.
Thanks, Councillor James. Tom?
Thank you, Chair. I've been looking for somebody to replace my office window for the last 3 months. So at the moment, I haven't been able to find a tradesman. So I can feel for this lady, and I don't have her financial difficulties. No, the situation. I've looked at the appeal decision, and the inspector never addressed the matter of the period for compliance at all, because he left that as per the enforcement notice. Now, it's a matter for the council's discretion as to how they proceed in terms of the period for compliance. But personally, I'm not unduly worried about causing precedents, because one has to take each case on its particular merits, and one has to take a proportionate response to these things, and individual financial circumstances must, of course, be a material consideration, particularly given that we've just gone through a COVID crisis and we've got these problems with tradesmen, etc. So officers do have the ability to provide some leeway in relation to the 3-month period. Whether that needs to be articulated by way of a formal variation to the enforcement notice, I don't know. I mean, personally, I would have thought that's a matter that can be dealt with by a discussion between the enforcement officers and the lady in question, and some form of accommodation can be made. I've no doubt that the enforcement officers will be guided by what members have had to say today, but I'm not sure that one needs to formally amend the enforcement notice. I mean, there are considerable points here which need to be taken into account, but I just wonder if the enforcement officers can deal with this and perhaps just leave the 3-month period as a long stop.
Okay, thanks, Tom. So the original motion that was put forward by Councillor Moore was for 12 months. It was seconded by Councillor Brown. Is that something that you still want to move, Councillor Moore, given the information that you just had?
I would, Chair, only on the basis that whilst I have every confidence with our enforcement officers, it is leaving the decision ultimately down to them, and we can, whilst we can assure the resident that leniency may be given in some time, there is still in black and white, it stays 3 months, and that will add undue worry.
So the motion's been put that we extend the time to 12 months for 11 Queen Street in terms of replacing the windows. Councillor Brown, are you still happy to second that? Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown. Councillor Lyons. You're on mute.
I'll happily second that. Sorry about that. I'm having trouble with my mute button as well.
So we're not sure. We're not sure what's happened to Councillor Brown.
Bring him.
Dan,
I'll give him a call.
Dan just wants to make a comment. We're about to vote, but I'll let you make the comment.
Just to clarify, Chair, obviously if members do agree for the 12 months, and Tom's alluded to you'd normally need to then vary the enforcement notice, which we'd normally report that back to members in a formal
No, I'm just wanting to know whether you're for or against.
No, we don't, Jim. You're not on mute.
No, he's trying to get back on, Chair. Sorry.
Just to clarify, through this process and this agreement, if it is agreed by members today, that those minutes can be taken as updating because we need to formally update the enforcement notice, you see, to reissue it with 12 months. So through this agreement today, we would do that as opposed to sending a further report back to committee.
Yeah, we don't need to do a further report. That's fine. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask for some clarification here, because Councillor Brown was called at least 3 or 4 times to participate. Therefore, in my opinion, he must have not been present or taking notice of what was being said. And under our rules and guidance, that means that he cannot vote on this issue.
Well, let's just see what happened with Councillor Brown before we make a judgment. Councillor Brown, do you want to come in and say what's just gone on?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Marjorie is absolutely right. For some reason, I just came out. I've been trying to get back in and I've just got back in. So I know absolutely nothing of what you've discussed. So I agree with Marjorie.
Okay, well, the seconder is now Councillor Loynes in that respect then, and you won't be voting. That's okay. Thank you. Tom?
That's okay. I've failed to put my hand down. But,
apologies. I'm usually quite...
I agree with Dan. What we would need to do is to reissue an amended enforcement notice, but we can do that under the normal schedule of delegation anyway, so it doesn't come back to members.
Okay, so the motion is to extend the time for the replacement windows to be installed to 12 months for 11 Queen Street, and it's been seconded by Councillor Loynes, and we'll go to a roll call, please.
Thank you very much. We'll start with Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher. Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
Technology is failing us at the crucial moment.
Okay, we'll move on to Councillor Brewer.
4.
Councillor Buchan.
4.
Councillor Moore.
4.
Councillor James.
Abstain.
Councillor Lindridge.
4.
Councillor Loynes.
4. And can you record that I seconded the motion as well, please? Thank you.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
4.
Councillor Stokel.
4.
Councillor Young.
4.
And we'll just try Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher again.
I think in the same way that Councillor James has quite rightly said that the chances are he wasn't part of that discussion anyway, and probably wasn't connected at that time. We'll just leave him out.
Okie dokes, thank you.
That motion's carried.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. 5.5 is an appeal at 16 Sydenham Road.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This was related to an appeal to change of use to a hot food takeaway. The application had been refused under delegated grounds for 2 reasons, namely the impact on the vitality and viability of the retailing centre, and also in respect of the health and well-being of local residents. The appeal was dismissed, and that adds yet another application or appeal that's been dismissed on health-related grounds. So it's quite a positive note for members in that respect. Our policies are working. Next one is at 56 Station Lane. A bit of an unusual application. Sorry, Chair.
It's all right. You carry on. You carry on, Dan. You chair the meeting. Can I go for a coffee now? Go for it, Dan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a bit of an unusual application related to, we granted planning permission for a detached annex outbuilding, but in line with our policies, we try and ensure that certain rooms aren't provided within the annex to ensure that there's sort of shared facilities with the main house. Therefore, we put a condition on restricting the floor plan, which didn't have a kitchen in it. The applicant appealed against that decision and that condition for a kitchen to be allowed to be used within the annex. And the inspector allowed the appeal, commenting that the provision of a kitchen within the annex wouldn't be contrary to our sort of policies on annexes. So that appeal was allowed.
Okay, thank you. 5.7, appeal at the rear of Millbank Close, land at the Fens in Hart Village.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This relates to the application was approved for up to 15 dwellings on the land to the rear of Millbank Close. One of the conditions related to the restriction of windows within the properties that back onto the adjacent field. We put the condition on in the interests of the privacy of occupiers' future and potential development should that come forward in and around the site, but also in visual amenity terms. That appeal is under consideration. It's for members to note that appeal.
Thank you, noted. And 5.8, has anybody got any desire to go through the current complaints, or can we leave that as a conversation between you and Dan at a later stage? That's okay. I have no further business, therefore I'll conclude the meeting at that point. We're at 10 minutes past 11. The next meeting is on Wednesday, the 2nd of September at 9:30, and Joe's going to indicate when